Silas Crowe, Mara Elling, and Jonah Redd never imagined their lives would collide in a way that would shake an entire town. But the night their paths crossed became the beginning of a mystery so dark and twisted that investigators would later call it the most disturbing case of the decade, one filled with hidden motives, shocking betrayals, and a truth more terrifying than the crime itself. Grayford was the kind of town people forgot existed. It sat quietly between miles of empty fields and a thick forest that locals rarely entered. Life moved slowly there, and nothing dramatic ever happened. Residents trusted each other. Stores closed early, and the biggest concern was usually the arrival of winter storms. For years, Grayford stayed peaceful, until a chain of unsettling events started to disturb its calm surface. These events seemed small at first, but each one added a strange new layer to the growing sense of unease. It began with the disappearance of pets. Cats vanished from porches, dogs slipped from fenced yards, and birds stopped appearing in the usual trees. People blamed coyotes or careless owners, but the number of missing animals felt too high to dismiss. Soon after, the town experienced random power outages. They were brief, lasting only a few minutes, but they always affected the same narrow part of Grayford. Each time, the lights flickered. Someone reported hearing odd noises outside. Some heard scraping, others heard rustling. Many ignored it, believing it was the wind. But a few felt something was wrong. Maren Hale was one of those few. She was a young investigative journalist who had always sensed patterns in chaos. She studied small details until they led her somewhere bigger. When most people shrugged off the strange events, she took notes, compared dates, and searched for connections. Her instincts told her that Grayford was not dealing with random incidents. Something organized was hiding beneath the surface. Her attention shifted toward a house that stood alone at the far edge of town. It belonged to Alden Cross, a quiet 32-year-old man who barely spoke to anyone. He left for work early and returned late. He kept the blinds closed. He carried no friends, no visitors, and no complaints. He lived as though the world outside did not exist. People described him as harmless, maybe lonely, but never threatening. Still, Maren felt drawn to his house, unsure if it was suspicion or curiosity. For months, Alden's routine remained unchanged, but several reports from neighbors added a new layer to the oddities. They mentioned feeling faint vibrations beneath their floors at night. Some claimed their walls shook for a few seconds. One resident described seeing a pulse of dim light from Alden's basement window, though she believed it might have been her imagination. These details reached Maren slowly, each one tightening the invisible net forming around the mystery. The first major breakthrough came from a hiking group that explored the forest behind Grayford twice a month. While walking a familiar trail, they noticed an area where the soil looked freshly disturbed. The group thought it might be the work of animals, but curiosity led them to dig. A few inches down, they found a shallow grave holding a decayed body. No one recognized the victim. There were no missing person reports matching the description. The only clue was a flat stone placed carefully inside the grave, carved with an unfamiliar symbol. It wasn't a random burial. Someone had taken the time to leave a message that no one understood. The discovery spread fear quickly. Grayford had never been connected to violent crime, so residents felt exposed in a way they weren't prepared for. Police blocked off the area and tried to reassure the public, but the uncertainty only made things worse. People wondered if the grave was recent, if more existed, or if the killer still walked among them. Detective Rowan Vale arrived days later. He had a reputation for solving difficult cases, especially those with unusual clues. The symbol carved into the stone caught his interest immediately. It suggested careful planning rather than impulsive violence. Rowan believed the grave linked to the strange events around town, though he didn't yet know how. Maren, who had been following the story, felt the same connection. She saw a pattern tying everything together, and her focus sharpened on Alden Cross. More than ever, Grayford shifted from a quiet town to a place filled with questions. The feeling of being hunted settled over the community. No one understood who was behind the events, or what the end goal was. but something dark had already taken root. Marin sensed the beginning of a far bigger story, one that would pull the entire town into its shadow before anyone realized how deep the danger truly ran. Marin Hale spent long hours reviewing every report she had collected. Her room became a maze of sticky notes, printed maps, and newspaper clippings. She arranged every strange incident in Grayford, according to date, time, and location. Slowly, something began to form. The missing pets, the power flickers, and the night noises were not spread randomly across the town. They curved around a specific center point, like ripples around a stone thrown into water. That center was Alden Cross's home. The pattern startled her, because it meant the events were not simply happening near him by chance, whether he caused them or was connected to them in a different way. The pattern was too exact to ignore. Lysa Thorne, Marin's assistant, helped organize the information. She examined power grid diagrams and confirmed that the electrical failures always started closest to Alden Street before spreading outward. None of the outages matched equipment failures. Instead, they appeared to be caused by something draining power. Suddenly, this discovery pushed Marin to look deeper into Alden's behavior. She started watching the edge of his property from a distance, carefully noting the times he left home and when he returned. It didn't take long to notice something unusual. Alden always stepped out at night, never during daylight. He carried the same metallic case each time, holding it firmly as if it contained something sensitive. He walked into the forest behind his home, staying gone until the sky began to brighten. Marin watched night after night, puzzled by his consistency. She wrote down each departure and return, until she realized the times matched several of the reports she had collected. Whenever Alden disappeared into the woods, something unsettling happened in Grayford. She brought her findings to Detective Rowan Vale. Rowan had spent days studying the symbol found in the grave. He searched through old documents, cultural references, and crime records from nearby counties, but the symbol did not match anything known. He believed the symbol represented a personal system created by whoever buried the victim. Marin's data fascinated him because it connected Alden to the timeline of unusual events, even though it didn't prove guilt. Rowan remained cautious, knowing that patterns can be misleading. Still, he felt this case demanded attention from multiple angles. Marin kept watching Alden, but she wasn't the only one who had noticed strange things. Valera Sundell, Alden's neighbor, mentioned to Marin that she often felt faint vibrations in her walls at night. She thought it might be the heating system, but Marin checked the dates Alira provided and recognized that each vibration matched a night Alden left his house. This strengthened the belief that something inside Alden's home was running when he wasn't there. Meanwhile, the investigation took another turn when a gas station clerk shared security footage from the week before the grave was found. Alden appeared on the footage for only a few seconds, standing near a darkened corner of the shop. Next to him was Cassian Drew, a man Rowan already recognized. Cassian was known for providing illegal security equipment to people who wanted to avoid official systems. He had been questioned in the past, but never charged. Seeing Alden with Cassian suggested a hidden connection that troubled Rowan deeply. Marin researched Cassian and discovered his involvement in several unexplained surveillance cases in distant towns. She realized Alden might not be acting alone. If Cassian was supplying him with devices, then Alden's activities were likely planned, not impulsive. This added a new layer of concern to the growing mystery. The tension in Grayford escalated after these findings. People sensed something spreading beneath the quiet streets. Families moved their pets indoors. Parents kept children close. News of the shallow grave still weighed heavily on everyone's minds, and the knowledge that someone in town might be carrying out a series of calculated experiments unsettled them. Further, Marin spent her evenings reviewing the notes she collected. The more she compared the events, the clearer it became that Alden's home was not just close to the disturbances, it was the anchor point that everything else circled. The house seemed to be at the heart of a secret. Only Alden understood. She wondered if the basement held the answers, or if the truth lay deep in the forest, where he vanished every night. Rowan believed that understanding Alden's nightly trips was key to solving the case. He started preparing for a search warrant, but knew he needed more concrete evidence. Every thread they followed led back to Alden Cross. Yet nothing explained what he was truly doing. Marin sensed they were approaching something dark, something bigger than a lone man with strange habits. Whatever was happening in Greyford was building momentum, and Alden's quiet presence was no longer just mysterious. It was becoming dangerous. Rowanvale secured the search warrant earlier than anyone expected. The mounting evidence, the grave in the woods, the suspicious footage, and the growing fear in Greyford pushed the authorities to act quickly. When the warrant was approved, Rowan gathered a small team and prepared to enter Alden Cross's home before dawn. Marin waited outside the property line, unable to join the official search, but determined to witness every moment. A cold silence hung over the neighborhood, broken only by the soft crunch of boots moving across the damp ground as officers approached the front door. The house looked ordinary from the outside. A small porch, faded paint, and a narrow strip of grass made it blend in with any quiet rural town. Yet the moment the officers stepped through the doorway, the atmosphere shifted. The air inside felt heavier, as if the house itself carried a long-held breath. The living room was neat and almost empty, with simple furniture, closed curtains, and spotless surfaces. It felt more like a discarded rental than a lived-in home. Rowan's eyes moved across the room until he spotted a door leading to the basement. The warrants focused heavily on what might lie below, so he instructed the team to move toward it. When the basement door creaked open, a low vibration traveled through the floor, faint but unmistakable. Rowan took the first step down the narrow staircase, flashlight in hand. As the beam cut through the darkness, the room below began to reveal its true nature. It wasn't a basement anymore. It had been transformed into a concealed laboratory, built with precision and intent. Metal shelves lined the walls. Cables covered the floor like tangled roots. Small monitors blinked quietly, each showing graphs and unreadable data. The entire space felt cold and purposeful. But the most disturbing discovery stood at the back of the room. Officers found a locked metal door that looked far too industrial for a home basement. After forcing it open, they stepped into a chamber that immediately explained the missing animals. Glass jars filled the shelves, each containing preserved remains. Every specimen had markings on the jars and numbered tags that corresponded to handwritten notes pinned on a board nearby. These notes documented experiments on fear responses in living creatures, dates, outcomes, changes in behavior, and even stress indicators were written with clinical detail. Rowan felt a rising unease as he realized Alden had been studying fear with a level of dedication that bordered on obsession. Another shelf held devices that were even more concerning. The metallic case Alden carried into the woods rested there, partly open. Inside, officers found tools designed to manipulate an environment. Tiny speakers, capable of producing high-frequency noises, motion-triggered lights, and vibration generators were arranged neatly. These devices matched the experiences residents had reported for months. Each tool was labeled with a purpose, showing a carefully structured experiment rather than random acts. As Rowan examined the rest of the basement, he noticed a large digital map attached to a corkboard. The map displayed Greyford, marked with a series of red circles. Each circle represented a location where someone experienced a fear-inducing incident. The map didn't look complete. There were open spaces where future circles might have been added. This meant Alden had plans that extended beyond what the town had already endured. Marin, standing at the top of the stairs after being granted limited access, felt the chilling weight of the discovery. Everything she had suspected was confirmed. The disturbances were not accidents, but tests carefully carried out by Alden. Yet the basement held more than evidence of experiments. It carried hints of internal struggle as well. Several notes showed sudden changes in Alden's handwriting, growing messier over time. The clear structure of his early entries eventually dissolved into frantic lines that suggested he had begun losing control over his own work. One corner of the room contained broken devices scattered across the floor. It looked as though Alden had attempted to destroy them in a moment of panic. Next to them lay a notebook filled with sketches of the mysterious symbol carved into the gravestone. The symbol appeared repeatedly, sometimes scratched out, sometimes circled. This made Rowan question whether Alden created the symbol or discovered it somewhere else. The possibility that the grave was connected to someone other than Alden began to surface. Even with the room fully searched, one truth became clear. Alden Cross was not merely experimenting with fear. He was preparing for something that required precision, planning, and total isolation. But he was missing, and the deeper Rowan studied the basement, the more he sensed that Alden might not be the dangerous one anymore. Something about the room felt like a warning. Whatever Alden had started was already slipping out of his control, leaving Grayford caught in the middle of a growing storm. No one understood yet. Marin left Alden's house with a sense of urgency pressing against her thoughts. The basement had revealed far more than she expected, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that one critical piece was still missing. As she reviewed the photos she took before being escorted out, her attention kept returning to a small detail. A date circled on Alden's calendar. It was only 2 days from now. Beside the date were the initials, ES. Marin recognized those initials immediately. They belonged to Elira Sundell, Alden's neighbor, who had reported the strange vibrations in her walls. The connection felt too strong to ignore, and the thought of waiting for official action was unbearable. Marin drove straight to Elira's house, unsure what she would find, but determined not to waste time. The neighborhood felt unusually still, as if everyone sensed something was coming. A sheet of fog drifted across the quiet street, giving everything a muted, uneasy appearance. When Marin reached Elira's front door, she felt a faint tremor beneath her feet. It wasn't strong, but it matched the pattern Elira had described earlier. Something inside the house was running. She pushed inside, after finding the front door unlocked. The home was tidy, with small decorations, neatly stacked books, and warm lighting that made it feel safe at first glance. But the deeper she walked, the more apparent it became that something unnatural had taken hold. A low humming sound vibrated through the air, subtle but constant. The sound had no clear source, seeming to come from the walls, the floor, and even the ceiling. Marin trusted her instincts, and they led her to the attic door. The humming grew louder when she touched the handle. The attic was dim and dusty, lit only by a thin beam of daylight coming through a small window. At first, Marin saw nothing unusual, but when she took a step further inside, she noticed a small metal device strapped to one of the supporting beams. Its lights blinked in steady rhythm, and a digital timer glowed with a countdown just under an hour. The device didn't look like an explosive. Instead, it resembled the strange equipment found in Alden's basement, only more advanced. Wires wrapped around a compact core, and several tiny speakers were attached to the rafters. Each speaker emitted a barely audible frequency that made the air feel heavy. Marin studied the device and realized its purpose. It wasn't meant to harm physically. It was built to manipulate the human mind by generating subtle sensory triggers that created fear, confusion, and vulnerability. Elira had been exposed to these signals for weeks without knowing it. She had been chosen as Alden's final test subject. The initials on the calendar confirmed it. The device was supposed to reach its peak at the end of the countdown. Marin could only imagine the psychological state Elira would be in by then. Rowan, after receiving Marin's message, organized a team to track Alden's movements. Officers searched the path behind Elira's house and discovered fresh footprints leading into the forest. The pattern of the prints suggested Alden had been there recently, possibly within the last hour. Their spacing showed signs of uneven steps, as if he was struggling to stay balanced. Rowan believed Alden was losing control mentally and physically because of prolonged exposure to his own devices. The forest, which once felt like a natural barrier for the town, now seemed like a place where something was unraveling. While Marin dismantled what parts of the attic device she could identify, Lysa Thorne contacted her with an important discovery. While reviewing Alden's notes, Lisa found mentions of long-range testing. These tests were not designed to target individuals, but entire areas. One section of the notes implied that the vibrations, noises, and power disturbances were early versions of environmental stress tests. Alira's house represented the final stage, where Alden planned to measure the effects of prolonged fear conditioning on a single person. If successful, he intended to apply the method across larger regions. The realization struck Rowan hard. Alden was not simply experimenting on animals or causing random fear. He had been treating Grayford as a psychological field study. But the most shocking part came next. New evidence pointed to Cassian Drew being the one who scaled Alden's projects, pressuring him into creating more intense devices. Cassian had the technical background to modify Alden's work, turning it into a more dangerous form. This explained the advanced equipment found in Alira's attic. It was not designed by Alden alone. As the countdown continued in the attic, Marin knew time was breaking away faster than they could handle. The device was only one part of a much larger plan, and disabling it would not stop what had already been set in motion. Rowan's team pushed deeper into the woods, racing against a threat they barely understood. The quiet town of Grayford no longer felt like a place touched by mystery. It felt like a place on the brink of something far darker, shaped by minds that believed fear could be measured, controlled, and weaponized. The truth behind the plan was closing in, and no one knew whether they could stop it. Before the final piece fell into place, Rowan's search team moved through the forest with increasing urgency. The trees grew thicker the deeper they went, forming a wall of shadows that swallowed the early daylight. The forest felt strangely alive, as if it carried the echoes of the fear that had spread across Grayford over the past months. Every snapped twig and shifting branch reminded the officers how isolated they were. Rowan followed the footprint trail carefully, noting how the prints wobbled, the heels dragging slightly. It was a sign that Alden Cross was weakening. Something had gone very wrong inside his mind long before anyone realized it. They reached a small clearing that looked untouched at first glance. But Rowan noticed a subtle disturbance. On the ground, a thin layer of leaves shifted in an unnatural pattern. He crouched and brushed the leaves aside, revealing a wooden panel hidden beneath the surface. The panel had no handle and was barely visible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Rowan signaled the team, and together they lifted it, exposing a dark, narrow entrance to a hidden underground room. The air rising from the opening felt stale and cold, carrying a faint metallic scent. Inside the room, the flashlight beams revealed a cramped space, lined with equipment similar to what they had found in Alden's basement. But everything here appeared damaged or half destroyed. Wires hung loosely from cracked panels, and several devices lay shattered on the floor. In the center of the room, curled against the wall, was Alden Cross. His body was limp and his breathing shallow. Rowan checked for signs of harm and quickly realized Alden was alive, but in a severe state of mental collapse. His eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and trembling, as if he couldn't distinguish sound from silence or shadows from reality. The team carried Alden out carefully, and Rowan studied the underground room again. He gathered pages of notes scattered across the floor. Many were written in rushed, uneven handwriting. Some described experiments, while others detailed symptoms Alden had been experiencing. He wrote about hearing noises, even when the devices were turned off, seeing movements in the corner of his eye, and feeling constant pressure in his skull. He tried to correct the effects, adjust the devices, or step away entirely, but each attempt only worsened his condition. In the final entries, he wrote about losing control, fearing his own creations, and not knowing how to stop the damage to his mind back in town. Marin and Lisa reviewed the data found in the underground room as medics transported Alden to a secure facility. The notes revealed that Alden had never intended to hurt anyone. His early research focused on understanding fear in animals, trying to map how controlled environments influenced instinctual responses. But Cassian Drew's involvement changed everything. Cassian pressured Alden to expand his experiments, offering money, equipment, and secrecy. As Alden's work grew, so did Cassian's influence, turning a scientific project into something dangerous and unstable. The body found in the shallow grave finally made sense. It belonged to one of Cassian's associates, someone who attempted to steal one of Alden's prototypes. Evidence from the notes indicated that Cassian was responsible for the death. Not Alden, Cassian hid the body in the woods, using Alden's symbol, hoping to make investigators assume Alden was connected. The symbol had never been Alden's creation. It was Cassian's way of sending a silent warning to anyone who interfered. The device in Alira's attic, once removed, left her home unsettlingly quiet. She had spent weeks under its influence, but the effects were temporary, and medical teams monitored her closely. Marin realized that Alden had attempted to stop the final test before reaching its peak, his collapses in the forest and the broken devices in the underground. Room showed that he no longer wanted the experiment to continue, but his deteriorating mind made him unable to dismantle the project fully. Leaving Grayford exposed to Cassian's intentions, Rowan issued a regional alert for Cassian Drew, labeling him the primary suspect behind the most dangerous elements of the case. But Cassian had vanished, leaving behind only the remnants of a plan that blended technology, psychology, and manipulation into something deeply unsettling. Grayford slowly returned to its normal routine in the following days. The fear devices were removed, the investigation continued, and the town tried to breathe again. Yet the scars remained. People walked more cautiously, avoided the woods, and double-checked their doors at night. Marin knew the story would haunt the town for years. It wasn't just about a man who experimented with fear. It was about the thin line between curiosity and destruction, and how, easily, that line can blur. Alden Cross became a symbol of unintended tragedy, a man consumed, not by evil, but by a system he couldn't control. And somewhere far away, Cassian Drew moved through the world freely, carrying the knowledge of how to break the human mind without ever touching it. The quiet town of Grayford would never forget what happened. It was, without question, the most terrifying crime story of the decade.